Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Had several people send me this story, including Stephen and David were the first two, but I got a flurry of them last night because there's an update on the Tyson Timbs case out of Indiana. And I mentioned before that Indiana has lost this case. They've lost this case. They've been told they're losers by the U.S. Supreme Court and others. And despite that, they keep fighting this case. They refuse to give up on this case, and this case is an absolute loser for them. But they're trying to prove a point, and by doing so, unfortunately, they're making the whole state of Indiana look bad. But Indiana now returns the Land Rover seized 7 years ago in landmark asset forfeiture case. This is the headline from Reason.com, but it's been widely reported, but this is the first place I saw it. So you might say, well, wait a second, Steve, if Tyson Timbs got his Land Rover back, isn't that a win? Well, Indiana is still fighting to keep the vehicle 7 years after they first seized the car, but for now, it is back in Timbs' driveway. And there's a photograph on Reason.com of Tyson Timbs in front of his car, looking happy like he's finally won. But even he knows this is just one more step in a very long journey that Indiana is forcing him to go on. CJ Ciaramella wrote the story, and it's been almost 7 years exactly since Indiana seized Tyson Timbs' Land Rover relating to a drug crime that has launched this 7-year legal odyssey that took Timbs to the U.S. Supreme Court, got a landmark ruling on civil asset forfeiture, although they framed it as a fines question. But on Tuesday, Timbs arrived home and found his Land Rover back in his driveway. Now, the Indiana Attorney General is still appealing, and they're going to appeal the case to the Indiana Supreme Court the third time the court has been asked to consider this case. His car has been returned for the moment, but the people who are representing Timbs have said, they're still fighting it. And here's the deal. The only reason Timbs can afford this is that the Institute for Justice has stepped in and picked up and taken over the case for Timbs, providing legal assistance. Because this is one of the reasons that states do civil asset forfeiture, is that if you sue them and you win, you get your stuff back. They don't pay you your attorney fees. So you got to pay for your attorney fees out of your stuff, and that's if you win. If you lose, you may still have to pay your attorney fees. So luckily, the Institute for Justice has agreed to step in and help Timbs with his case. Otherwise, he couldn't have gone to the Indiana Supreme Court 3 times and the U.S. Supreme Court once. Now, Tyson said in a press release, for years, this case has been important not just for me, but for thousands of people who are caught up in forfeiture lawsuits. To me, the state's refusal to give back my car has never made sense. If they're trying to rehabilitate me and to help me help myself, why do you want to make things harder by taking away the vehicle I need to meet with my parole officer or go to recovery programs or go to work? Forfeiture only makes it more challenging for people in my position to clean up and be contributing members of society. Now, Timbs did plead guilty in 2015 to selling heroin to an undercover police officer and was sentenced to a year of house arrest and 5 years of probation. But Indiana also decided to seize his Land Rover, which was worth $42,000, which they admit had nothing to do with any of this. The Land Rover had been purchased with a life insurance payout that Timbs had gotten on his late father. But the state doesn't care. They just want to take it from him anyways. Under civil asset forfeiture laws, police can seize property, cash, cars, and even houses suspected of being connected to criminal activity. Law enforcement groups say civil asset forfeiture is a critical tool for disrupting drug trafficking and other organized crime. And of course, most Americans go, no, that's just theft. It's just theft. It's a violation of the Due Process Clause of the Constitution. It's just wrong. So civil liberties groups say the practice creates perverse profit incentives for police and is disproportionately used against low-level offenders like Timbs, and in many cases against people who aren't even charged with a crime, and that's a problem. More than half of U.S. states have passed some form of reforms in response to these concerns, but they haven't done away with it entirely. And the easiest way to get rid of this, I've discussed this before, there's a couple different ways you can do it. One way to make it really go away quickly, though, is if you say if the police seize something, they don't get to keep any of it. They don't get to keep any of it. Everything they seize goes straight to the state treasury. And the police departments would just stop doing it. They'd be like, what's in it for us? And then that would indicate to you what's wrong with this, is they're actually doing it because they are incentivized. They're being paid to do it. They get to keep it. So it's like, looting when you're, rampaging through a country or something. Timbs challenged the original seizure, arguing that the taking of his vehicle, which was worth 4 times the maximum fine for the crime he committed, amounted to an unconstitutionally excessive fine under the 8th Amendment. The Indiana Supreme Court rejected that argument on the grounds the U.S. Supreme Court had never explicitly ruled that the 8th Amendment applies to the states. And last February, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that no, the 8th Amendment does in fact apply to the states. Sorry. The quote from Ginsburg said, "For good reason, the protection against excessive fines has been a constant shield throughout Anglo-American history. The ruling opened up a new avenue for plaintiffs like Timbs to try to challenge asset forfeiture in court. But this still does not do away with civil asset forfeiture. It simply says that if they seize your assets, they've got to show either some connection to the crime or that the amount of the assets makes sense as a fine, which is an argument they never actually made before. So the Supreme Court did not rule on what constituted an excessive fine. It kicked that question back to Indiana Supreme Court, which created a 3-pronged test last October to determine when a government fine or seizure is disproportionate to the alleged offense. The Indiana Supreme Court, in turn, then sent Timbs' case back to a state trial court to be reconsidered. In April, an Indiana judge ruled that under the new test, the seizure of Timbs' Land Rover, a tool essential to maintaining employment, obtaining treatment, and reducing the likelihood that he'd ever again commit another criminal offense, was unconstitutionally excessive and ordered the vehicle returned. That is what the Indiana Attorney General is now appealing to the state Supreme Court again. Tyson's case has gone through every level of the American judicial system, in some instances twice. The attorney Wesley Hoddett said in a statement, he's an Institute for Justice senior attorney, the state's relentless use of its forfeiture machine is and continues to be a profoundly unjust exercise of power, and it underscores that civil forfeiture is one of the greatest threats to property rights in the nation today. And here's the thing. When I do a video like this, especially on Tyson Timbs, I get 98, 99% thumbs ups. People like the videos. 1 or 2% I get thumbs downs. The comments are overwhelmingly in favor of the man giving his car back. But invariably, I get 1 or 2 people go, Steve, the guy was dealing drugs. He shouldn't get to keep his car. Is that what the law says? Deal drugs, lose your car. Where does it say that? Where does it say that? Most people in our society, when asked how they think the law should be applied, assuming they want them to be applied evenly, would be asked and said, what do you want to happen to somebody who commits a crime? Pay a fine or go to jail. Possibly probation. But those are the 2 things. Pay a fine, go to jail. Where does it take the man's car, regardless of value? Where does it say that? And so don't give me this, drug dealers deserve what they get. Because you can say it's not burglars deserve what they can get. People who speed deserve what they get. People who drink and drive deserve what they get. I mean, you can make that argument about any form of crime or any type of criminal. The point is, the Supreme Court of the United States of America has said that the fines that are levied against a criminal defendant who's been convicted cannot be excessive. Okay? And excessive, now it's true, that's not something that can be defined with a bright line. There's no such thing that, where you can open up a book and go, this is good and this is not. Obviously, that's going to be worked out in the courts a little bit. But the problem here is the Indiana Attorney General simply refuses to give up. Why? I don't know. Possibly? Who knows? Who knows? But there are some people who hate to lose. And some people who hate to lose, and they're doing the fighting on behalf of other people, supposedly. The AG in Indiana is supposedly representing the people of Indiana. And the people of Indiana, I suspect if you ask them, would overwhelmingly tell you, give this man his car back, apologize, and go home. The game is over. And it's somebody needs to stop this. The Indiana Supreme Court, or whoever gets this hot potato last, needs to actually sanction the Attorney General and say, you have clearly got a problem here. You are pursuing something that's beyond the pale of reasonableness. You're pursuing something to the point where you are now starting to look crazy. And you're pursuing it allegedly on behalf of people who don't want you doing this. Okay? You're out of control. Courts have the power to sanction parties or attorneys before them who are taking unreasonable and for lack of a better word, incorrect actions. Okay? It's time that the Supreme Court of Indiana stopped this. They need to make a ruling on this and say, number one, the guy's got his car back. Good. Now, for the AG who won't stop, we're going to stop you. And they need to stop him. So it's time that the Indiana Supreme Court stepped up and stopped this madness. Okay? So the good news is that Tyson Timbs got his car back. The bad news is it was taken in the first place and kept for 7 years. So what can I tell you? Stephen and David, thanks for sending me the story. Reason.com, thanks for writing good articles about this. Other people have covered this as well, but they've been on top of this thing the whole time, and I appreciate that. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. The secret of creativity is knowing how to hide your sources.